So thank you everyone for coming today to AQ, Adaptive Intelligence. And our Thinking Thursdays episode is going to be a very, very special one. Our topic for today is your brain on biofeedback. So this is a topic I'm very passionate about. And so is Dr. Michael R. Smith, who is our special guest today. And he's a doctor of naturopathy. And he also loves biometrics and biofeedback as well. So, like I mentioned, he does naturopathy and then knows multiple different things, which I'm sure he'll get into. He also goes into HRV, and he does talk about different biometrics that we can use to quantitatively measure our body's activity and our function, so we can then do things to improve it and see what the benefits are that we've actually achieved, so we can measure that. Because you can't improve anything that you don't measure. He's done multiple interviews, and he's into multiple forms of meditation as well. Dr. Michael also has been a world-renowned athlete, or at least an athlete that aspires to be the best version of himself. So he's going to tell us a little bit about his journey, about where he started and where he's at today, and all the things that helped him get to where he's at. He's happily married, and he has many friends and family, and he serves his local community very well with helping them become the best versions of themselves as well. And so, without further ado, I'll be bringing to you the topic of today, which is your brain on biofeedback. And it's Dr. Michael. Lovely introduction, and I appreciate that. You're very welcome. So tell us a little bit about how your biohacking journey started, because I know you're an athlete, and it's very important when you're an athlete to, really get that competitive edge over people, not just physically, but especially mentally. So tell us about your background, all your schooling, and what the things are that helped you the most.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'm excited to connect with you today and the rest of your community. So thanks everyone for showing up. As interested as I am in all this stuff, this is my favorite topic to talk about. So thanks for coming in and joining and listening. My journey kind of started back when I was young. I started wrestling when I was 10 years old. I had a lot of energy in me, and I needed to get it out. So wrestling was one of the best ways to do that. And I was very athletic, and so I picked it up very quickly. And as I got better, got into high school, I really got into peak performance. I didn't really know what I was doing at that time, but I was doing, visualization, and I was doing a form of meditation. But like I said, I didn't know that I was doing that at the time. And I knew I wanted to go into medicine. I wanted to help people. I found naturopathic medicine, and it really resonated with me because the philosophy was completely different from conventional medicine. Where conventional medicine was interested in the symptoms and treating symptoms and suppressing those symptoms, naturopathy is about treating and identifying the underlying cause, and then treating that with the natural modalities like diet, nutrition, and supplementation, herbal medicine, and then of course what we're going to be talking about today, which is the mind-body medicine and biofeedback. So in medical school, I found that performance medicine and biofeedback was a specialty, and so I kind of jumped in with both feet and became board certified in biofeedback, and I've been practicing now for the last 3 years, helping kind of a large, broad patient population. But the last year or so, I've been working more specifically with entrepreneurs, executives, athletes, people that are really driven and motivated to optimize their performance. when I was training, you'd ask me some of the things that had worked best for me back then. It was being very consistent with my diet, my supplementation, and my recovery. That is one thing that a lot of athletes don't train, is recovery. And that's so essential. And talk more about that. We're talking about heart rate variability biofeedback, and actually being able to measure how well recovered or how activated the nervous system is through that very simple measure.
I've listened to some of your other talks. And it's funny how we have a very similar background. I guess the only difference is you went into naturopathy, and my background was I went into like chiropractic at first, and that was my initial training. It was a close call because I was like, naturopathy, chiropractic, which one should I do? But my focus was on the nervous system, right? So it's so funny how we both were seeking the same thing. We got like diverged, and then we are like converging again in our interests, right? So the biometric stuff is amazing, like measuring the body, making it better, but all to make the mind better. And all of that is focused in on how healthy your nervous system is, how healthy is your neural coherence, essentially, right? So these tools help us measure how coherent we are internally, right? Because it's difficult to really measure something like that externally unless you're like setting somebody up, but we don't want to do that. Tell us a little bit about some of the positive changes that you've seen with people that you've worked with that have justified putting all this time, all this effort into this, because it has life-changing effects. But what are some of those effects that you've noticed?
Yeah, well, hey, you said it, man. Life-changing. I would say probably the first thing that people notice is they're just more relaxed, right? They're more at ease, at rest, which is where we should be, at rest, right? Their sleep is one of the first things that improves. We talk about the nervous system. It's the master controller, right? It's the central processing unit for every internal organ function. So I have patients that come to see me that understand that, and I have women that come to me for fertility. I have women that come to see me for their menopausal symptoms, for just balancing hormones. People that come and see me with gut issues, IBS, all across the board, just with the understanding that if they change their nervous system, and if they can balance their nervous system, they can balance the rest of the internal organ function that's going on. So the effects are so broad and far-reaching.
Absolutely, yeah. And I noticed this too, but beyond just like the disappearance of like these bodily, problems that people were dealing with, you also see a transformation in their psychology, right? Which is really what we're trying to do, because that's what really gives you a better quality of life. He talks about that kind of internal transformation that happens because they made that conscious decision to change their neurology. What have you noticed?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's 100% about their perception, right? We become neurologically hardwired to be a certain way based on our upbringing, based on our past experiences, based on our traumas. All of that impacts and comes into this moment right here, right now, how I'm going to respond and react to this social situation, or to this stressor, whatever it is. So, the first part is balancing that nervous system, right? Shutting off the sympathetic fight or flight and turning on those parasympathetics. One of the first ways that I do that with patients is training them on how to breathe functionally and strengthening that parasympathetic nervous system, building that resiliency into it. The next step is creating that mindful awareness through different techniques and tools, making them more consciously aware of those patterns, right? Their thought patterns, their emotional patterns, their behavior patterns, all of those things that are holding them back from that growth. So that's kind of the next step. And then usually the next step after that is training more emotional regulation techniques in different types of meditation based on where they're at. And then usually the last piece is training compassion, gratitude, right? We always tend to be our harshest critics. We tend to be very hard on ourselves. And so starting to train compassion practices and gratitude so that we can start to give ourselves the compassion that we give others. And that's always kind of the last step because it tends to be the most difficult one for folks to get to.
Yeah, and then you were able to reach almost like enlightened states when you're able to really balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic in harmony, right? And then that's when you're able to get to places like forgiveness or, having actual ecstatic experiences, like all sorts of amazing things. It's amazing what happens when you're able to really train the nervous system. So I think an important thing to talk about, which most people don't really understand, like, why does this work? What's the mechanism, if you will, right? And that's neuroplasticity. And I'm sure you know a lot about neuroplasticity. Do you mind telling everyone here a little bit about it and why it's so important?
Yeah, neuroplasticity is brain training, right? It's about pruning those neurological connections and then sprouting new ones. And the way that we do that is through practice and training, right? We have to train a new way of being if we're going to become a new way. So it's training a new thought pattern, it's training a new emotional pattern, new behavior pattern, all of those things.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins is repetition is the mother of skill. And I know being in martial arts yourself, wrestling is a form of martial arts, you really fear that guy that really knows that one move really well more than one guy that knows 1,000 moves but is a master of none, right? So can you tie your athletic training to what you do with the mind? Because it's almost like taking that same approach and turning it into a gym for the mind, right? Or like a mind dojo.
Absolutely. Yeah, the way that I explain it to patients most often is coming from that physical aspect, right? Everyone's very familiar with training their physical body, whether it's yoga or weight training or hip workouts, right? If someone, wants to become Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's not going to happen overnight. It's not even going to happen in a few weeks, right? That's going to take months of training to get that level of physique. Exact same process with training the brain.
And I did watch some of your other videos, and you mentioned that there's like a certain amount of times you should breathe in and breathe out, and why that's important. You some of the biometrics that you use, like HRV. So tell everyone why that's important as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So heart rate variability training, I use for a lot of different things. But basically, it's all about balancing the nervous system, right? And a lot of the entrepreneurs, executives, athletes that I work with, they're very good at managing their time. And a lot of times their schedule is completely booked. They don't have any time to fit things in. But one of the things that they really fail to grasp is energy management. And that's where the heart rate variability biofeedback comes in, because it's about measuring that metric of how ready to perform or how much more recovery I need so that I can perform often. So that's kind of one of the ways that I talk about HRV biofeedback. Yes, when we're training HRV biofeedback, we're training the nervous system through the breath. One of the ways that we're doing that is through the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is cranial nerve number 10. It's up here in the brainstem, comes down to the neck, connects to the vessels of the neck, connects to the heart, to the lungs, to the diaphragm, to all of our abdominal organs, and connects all the way down into our pelvic organs as well. So this cranial nerve, but it has such broad, restful, rejuvenating action throughout the whole body. So super important. And we stimulate it when we start to breathe in the belly, when we activate the diaphragm. So that's one of the first things, is activating that diaphragm by getting the breath down to the belly. The next thing is the rate of the breath, okay? Many people, even breathing in a normal breath rate range, which is between 12 to 20 breaths per minute, are still engaging in these dysfunctional patterns of breathing, right? These chronic hyperventilation patterns, whether it's holding the breath, taking in these big inhales followed by these large sighs, so frequent sighing, frequent yawning, these are all kind of some of the different patterns. And it doesn't take long. After just 3 minutes, we limit the oxygen up to the brain by 30 to 40%.
Yeah, well, what kind of effect that would have on somebody's neurology?
Exactly. Mostly executive functioning is what becomes challenged, right? And if I'm living in that, activated state where, I'm frustrated or worrying about this thing or that thing, and the nervous system is just always activated, then I also tend to be more in my midbrain, in those midbrain structures, the limbic structures, like the hippocampus, the amygdala, which the amygdala is all about, that fear-based center of the brain. It's about the hypervigilance and being on edge, go, 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 go. And if I'm in that part of the brain, I get stuck there. And the reason, you literally get stuck, it's hard to get out of it, you don't have access to the prefrontal cortex and all of those executive functions. Focus, concentration, memory, decision-making, productivity, all those things start to become more challenging because of that. So the rate of the breath, very important, and we want to slow that breath rate way down so that we can activate something called the baroreceptors. And the baroreceptors are these pressure sensors, these stretch receptors that are in the carotid sinuses and the aorta, the chambers of the heart. They respond to these pressure changes in the vessels when we start to breathe at a very slow rate. So between 4.5 to 6.5 breaths per minute, which is where we train breathing. And when we do that, what happens when we activate those baroreceptors is that we completely inhibit that sympathetic nervous system. We completely shut it offline. It's no longer there. And so what's left is just the parasympathetics. So we activate that restful rejuvenation nervous system, and we start to make it stronger over time. What happens over time is that we're activating those baroreceptors. We're going to decrease our resting respiration rate, our resting baseline respiration. So let's say, for example, you're breathing, 18 breaths per minute right now, and we start training for the next 8 weeks at 5 breaths per minute. In 8 weeks, your new resting baseline respiration rate will go from 18 maybe down to 12 or 10 breaths per minute. So now at rest, you're in a more parasympathetic range, which is where we should be. That makes sense?
Absolutely. So, it's important to think about what kind of long-term effects little changes have. Because if you're under breathing, for example, or maybe if you're even over breathing, the amount of oxygen going to your brain is not going to be enough. So your neurology is literally going to deteriorate. It's not going to be as high functioning as it can be, right? So what we're looking to do is when we biohack, we want to optimize. We want to make you better than your baseline, right? We want to keep improving you so that you can then have more bandwidth to do all the things that you love, all the things that you care about. Go on the trips that you want to go on, play with your kids or grandkids, make that money, start that new business, do the things that are important, but you have to, no matter what you care about, you have to take care of your neural system. So tell us a little bit about how having the biometrics helps us. Like, can you show us an example of one that you might have lying around, for example, or some that you really have used a lot and really like throughout the years, and how that's been helping you?
So there's a lot of different apps out there, and there's a lot of different measurement tools. When I'm working with folks, do a full 72-hour study of their heart rate variability to get a good baseline of where their nervous system is at, and then do some training, and then do a post-training 72-hour study to see training effect size. But while they're actually training, what I'll usually have them get is a polar heart rate strap. So just a polar heart rate monitor, H9 or H10, and they're using that every single morning to measure their morning readiness, to get those resting baseline HRV metrics, to assess their recovery and where their nervous system is at, right? Because that's a very unique metric specifically to them. So we need to collect a whole lot of data, weeks and months worth of data, to be able to see where their baseline is at. And then based on that, now we can start to track if it's high or if it's lower than baseline. So we need to, again, train more recovery, or we can go, full out as far as performance. So the full heart rate strap I'll usually use with Elite HRV app. The reason I like the Elite HRV app is because it actually gives you all of the HRV metrics. And I like to train my patients to look at the whole spectrum of the HRV metrics and understand them so they can understand their nervous system better. So that's why I usually prefer the Elite HRV app. You can see all that data, and I don't charge you for it. It's free. The HRV4 training app, you have to pay, and it's modest. It might be like $5 or $10 a month for their online portal to get the rest of that data. So that's the one that I'll have patients do. And I also have them use the polar heart rate strap during their training, because they can measure their heart rate variability metrics during their breathing practices and during their meditations, so that they can see, again, the effect size of what that breathing practice or that meditation had on their heart rate variability and be able to track it over time. And what they're going to see if they're training consistently, and most of my patients are training 20 minutes twice a day, which is what the research shows that it takes to start to build that strength and resiliency into their parasympathetic nervous system. That's, they're noticing their HRV metrics increase over time.
Yeah, and I love that you use HRV because it's really a measure of adaptability. The more adaptable you are, the more variable your heart rate is going to be, because you want your heart rate to basically be responsive to your environment. If you're adaptable, for example, and a tiger jumps out at you, you're going to want your heart rate to go up so that you can run away faster. Versus if you're not adaptable, you're going to be like, oh, a tiger, and then you know what's going to happen. You're going to get eaten. Yeah, but the reverse is true too. So say you're just hanging out, you're relaxing, but your heart's racing, you don't know why, because you're just not very adaptable. You're stuck at a very high heart rate, right? So that's going to have bad effects. You're going to start to break down, because that sympathetic tone is very destructive to the body. So sympathetic tone is fight, flight, stress response, the adrenaline, versus the parasympathetic is more rest, digest, and heal. It's more restorative. So what we want to do is we want to have the right balance at the right time. And so tell us how this is a bit different from, I guess, if you want to call it traditional medicine or the traditional health field, because they're only interested in keeping you alive and keeping you at an average baseline rate. They're not looking to amplify you and get you to your new level. So this is something way beyond, this is like a totally different spectrum, right? Can you tell us about how this is different from those traditional forms of medicine and understanding the human body?
Yeah, absolutely. Conventional medicine, those docs are really good at two things. They're good diagnosticians for the most part, and they also know their drugs very well.
And the surgeries.
Yes.
They like to cut people up.
Right, exactly. And another thing that they do great is emergency medicine. Your arm does get eaten off by a tiger. Don't come see me. Or get ready to the ER. They're the most well apt to treat you and save your life. But as far as everything else, the foundations is really where we can make the most progress. And what I mean by the foundations of our health is our nutrition, right? Our sleep, our stress, our movement and exercise, our hydration, all of those, just simple, small pieces have a huge impact on how our body and nervous system function. So those are the things that kind of need to be set, which is, again, why I call them the foundation. Once those foundational pieces are in place, then we can really start to build on top of that and really create a adaptable, resilient human.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned those little habits, those little things that we can control, because nobody gets a heart attack in a day. That's years and years and years and years and years of eating the wrong foods versus the right foods. For example, being very weak and not muscular, that's years and years and years and years of not doing exercise. You could say that about so many different things, but you do years and years of the right things, even though they're small things, they have compounding effect. It's like the little snowball that goes down the hill and it becomes suddenly an avalanche. We're taking that approach. It's momentum, right? So tell us more about things that amplify momentum, because I know naturopathy doctor, you're able to give basically advice that most medical doctors can't give. So I'm sure a lot of that is, natural things, right? Because natural things, they're cleaner than, like a synthetic drug that's made in a lab somewhere and they have to keep trying to purify it and it's never perfect. You're able to give, plants and different herbs and supplements that come from nature, and nature gets it right 100% of the time. So you don't have to worry about all the weird chemicals and all that. What are some other things that you give? Do you do adaptogenic herbs or anything like that?
Yeah. So it's about working with the body instead of against the body, right?
Right.
It's about modulating systems instead of being anti-system and trying to completely suppress, this pathway or that pathway. So it's really about supporting and encouraging and helping give the body what it needs to be able to function and heal itself. But yes, a lot of nutrition, a lot of sleep medicine, and gut healing. A lot of folks that come to me certainly do have a fair amount of dysbiosis or food sensitivities. Those are things that, need to be addressed. So that they can have an optimally functioning system. A lot of different supplementation that has to be unique to their own case. So it's not, one protocol across the board for one person or for everyone by any means. It's very individualized. But yeah, I do use adaptogenic herbs to help support that secondary stress response. When especially business owners come to me and we're starting some biofeedback, I will often support their nervous system directly with something like GABA or 5-HTP or L-theanine, and sometimes with the adaptogenic herbs and that secondary stress response. And the adaptogens are kind of quenching the adrenal gland's response to secreting those stress hormones, epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol. Those adaptogenic herbs come in and kind of just quench that response and help it be more balanced.
Yeah, how we were talking about before. So he's talking about the epinephrine and norepinephrine. When you have a high sympathetic tone, your body's going to be producing more cortisol. And cortisol is actually, it packs on the pound. That's the stress hormone. It starts to destroy your health, So what are some of the things that you use to counterbalance that? You have your meditation, you've got your supplementation. You said you'd also do some diet stuff. What sort of foods do you recommend people eat?
Well, that's completely individualized too, based on their own case, but kind of as a broad general recommendation for most folks, I think that the research really supports kind of a modified Mediterranean keto style type of diet. And so that's typically what I will recommend for my peak performers.
So what are some more of the methods that you use? Because I do remember on some of your other interviews that you mentioned water therapy, like aqua therapy.
Oh yeah, so hydrotherapy. You know, a lot of people are probably familiar with the Wim Hof method and doing that chronic hyperventilation type of breathing to stimulate the sympathetic nervous system and stimulate those stress hormones to be secreted so that we feel good in the moment. It's almost like a high in some sense, a runner's high almost, basically. He does cold immersions. This is a little bit different. With most folks, we'll do contrast hydrotherapy. Contrast hydrotherapy a little bit different in that it is stimulating the immune system. It's stimulating the cardiovascular system. One of the main things that I use it for, though, I mean, it is balancing the nervous system as well, but with injury, what it's doing is it's bringing in brand new oxygenated blood, nutrient-rich blood to help with that healing, and it's removing all those inflammatory waste products that get built up right there. So it kind of does this to the tissues. It exercises the tissues without doing any exercise at all. And exercise those vessels too, so the vessels actually, it's that kind of tonic exercise for those intrinsic smooth muscles.
Yeah, and I'm also a big advocate of like hot and cold showers too. It's a nice little trick because what it does is it challenges your body's ability to, for example, when you're just hit with cold, your sympathetic nervous system goes up, and then you have to mentally go into parasympathetic to be able to handle it, right? So then you're stretching the width, right, the bandwidth of the expression of tonality in your nervous system. So, but then when you have warm, it like calms you back down. So then you have to like bring yourself out of that state. And then eventually, if it gets too warm, then you're like, well, I got to do something about this, right? So you fight a little bit, and then you just keep switching back and forth, right? So that gives you more resiliency. So tell us a little bit about why that's useful.
Well, it's useful for a lot of different things, but you know, same thing for me. I use the hot and cold showers. I love immersions, so if you've got two baths at home, fill one up as cold as you can stand, fill one up as hot as you can stand, and you're jumping back and forth. 3 minutes in hot, 1 minute in the cold, and you do that 5 times back and forth, and your body it's humming.
Yeah, literally, you're like buzzing. You have like so much energy. You're like, whoa, I didn't have this before. It was there. You just had to unlock it, right? So that's why what we want to do with all these different modalities is we want to unlock your potential, because that's what it's all about. You know, if you want to achieve more, if you want to do more in life, you just want to experience more in life, you have to be more adaptable. If you just want to even just survive, especially in these crazy times, you have to be more adaptable. So, you know, these technologies allow us to do that. And that's why it's so important. And you can do that at any age, any stage of your life. It's beneficial. So, what are some other things that you use yourself to help you in your journey? Because I know like going through all the schooling itself is also challenging, right? Like I discovered a lot of these things because schooling was so rough. And you know, I remember having to stay up until 5 a.m. studying stuff, wondering like how am I gonna stay up? Well, let me start running, let me like do hot and cold showers, like doing everything I could to like keep pushing the envelope of how much I could achieve, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you had similar story to tell about that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. I mean, talk about stress, huh? Medical school is certainly the most stressful time of my life. And that's when I really dove in to these practices that we're talking about right now, especially balancing the nervous system. Once my paradigm shift of focus here first, right? Bring all the attention to here because this is controlling everything else. So the first thing is simply just the breathing. And then getting into becoming more mindfully aware of your patterns.
Yeah, and you become a stronger person, you know, like not just physically, but especially emotionally, mentally. The choice is like, let the stress and the weight of that crush you, which, that could be said of any situation. You could be a mom, you're like, oh my God, there's all these kids everywhere. Like, what am I going to do? Or that business owner and say, oh my God, we just had a really bad business downturn. It's those moments that are crucial where how you react will tip the balance one way or another, if you succeed or if you fail. So that's why we adopted these technologies. We found that we went outside of our scope of understanding what we were comfortable with to say, wow, there's gems out there. We can incorporate this and use this in our own journey towards helping people.
Yeah, that's come a long way, man. All of this stuff. The HRV measurement tools, all of the neurofeedback measurement tools. I mean, it's like every year, even more frequently now. There's new devices, there's new measurement tools coming out that all have their own kind of unique thing, and they're getting better and better at being able to measure these things. So the layperson can now start to measure this stuff. You don't have to go in to see, the neurofeedback specialist to start training your brain. You can start to train it on your own with some of these neat devices.
Yeah, and you can do it at home and then like try to figure out how to do it, or you can come to one of the biohacking retreats and we'll teach you with a whole group of healers and practitioners that do this, help you, coach you in person in a beautiful environment, beautiful people. That's the real way to like learn, you have to immerse yourself, right?
Yeah, in the community setting too. I do like that, having that support, hearing other people's journey and their own meditation. I remember when I first learned TM, Transcendental Meditation, that, part of the training is being in that group setting and talking about your meditations and your experience. So having that community to be able to share those things, and it's inspiring too. It kind of keeps you driven. It keeps you on the path.
You learn so much more, and you learn at such an accelerated rate, right? It's like, you could try to figure it out like, 10 years by yourself and maybe get 1/4 of the results if you just like showed up in person with a bunch of people, and you get exponential results so that when you do go back home, you know what you're doing. Before we go ahead and open up to our open discussion, because I'm sure lots of people have lots of questions, so I thank you so much for all your wisdom, naturopathy, HRV, and all these different biometrics and ways to adapt. Is there any closing statements that you'd like to make?
The one thing, if you could take away something from this, would be what holds most people back is simply their perception, right? Their orientation to this relationship or to this person, this thing, whatever it may be. It's that faulty perception that often holds us back from experiencing that growth that we desire. So keeping that in mind, that it's all about our perception. If we can reframe our perception and shift it, then we can start to lay down those new neural tracks, those new neural pathways, and start to practice becoming a new way. And that's when it starts to become a little bit more effortless.
I love that. And it's like it says in the good book, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So I'm going to go ahead and open up our open discussion. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead in the chat below.
Adaptive intelligence. You searched for more. You wanted to become the best version of yourself. Your search is over. And the technology finally exists. to go. Your time has come. Unleash your potential. AQ. Adaptive Intelligence.
Hey, Julie.
Hey there, thanks for the great talk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you found this to be effective with PTSD?
Yeah, so most of the folks that I work with are those that have the different psychophysiologic issues. Those have both a mental and a physical component. So anxiety, depression, insomnia, PTSD, ADHD, panic disorders, and the like.
And how has the result been, particularly for PTSD, using biofeedback?
Incredible, right? If they're motivated to change and practice being a new way, then, I haven't had one patient that hasn't really grown significantly if they have that drive to be consistent about their home practice. I could tell them to do this and that until I'm blue in the face, and we can practice all of the techniques in office, but if they're not practicing at home outside the clinic, then there's not going to be a ton of progress.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, consistency in practicing.
Well, good question, Julie. I like that.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Pleasure to be here and to see you all and listen to the discussion. I was wondering how adrenaline may fit into this adaptive learning, that maybe it intensifies, enhances, or maybe speeds up your adaptive learning as necessary, like for the fight or flight mechanism. So maybe Robert can answer that for me.
Interesting. You mean Robert or Michael?
Michael, sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Great question. Yeah.
I cut out a little bit after adrenaline.
Yeah, so she was asking, is it possible that adrenaline helps you essentially learn faster because it seems to speed everything up?
Interesting.
Yeah, great question.
So that's what you would kind of think, right? That it's going to speed up brain processing because it's giving you this rush, right? The opposite is true. If I go in to fight or flight, I am inhibiting the portions of my brain that are going to help me make good decisions, that are going to help me with that processing. So all of those executive functionings will become more challenged because that fight or flight system becomes activated. Fight or flight is all about survival. So if I see that predator around the corner, survival mechanism kicks in, and it's going to be nothing but the senses, right? It's going to be all sensory stuff. So the decision making is mostly up here in the higher cortical centers of the brain, and that is going to become more challenged. And so having that adrenaline is not going to speed up any of those processes.
Thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate your response to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
So we've got another question coming in here on my parents. So Gabriella here. She said, the same happens with stress. What do you mean exactly by that? I'd love to hear it.
That you stop reacting and learning when you are stressed.
Yeah, you do.
And a patient today, we were talking about this. When we go into that sympathetic response, all of those higher cortex functionings are going to definitely become more challenged. Focus, concentration, memory, productivity, decision making, learning, skills, all that kind of goes offline. And people's brains just shut off, especially if it's a very significant activation response. Yeah, you'll just go blank, right? And I have lots of patients where that happens to them fairly quickly.
Yeah, I know several languages, and when I am under very deep stress, I forget all of them. I have legumes in my mind.
Yep, absolutely.
That's been a challenge in my life. Like, that's why I always hated exams. I always hated exams because, like, they put you in that stress state, and you're like, I know that I know it. I just gotta remember it somehow. But it's hard with all the stress going on.
Yeah, I see a fair amount of students and student athletes for not just performance on the field, but also performance in the classroom. Because, yeah, you get into those stress states, and all of our executive functioning just goes out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I believe Julie had a question here. I saw her pop in here. Go ahead, Julie. She said, "What's the use for insomnia?"
I have had pretty bad insomnia. So, mostly falling, but even waking after falling. I'm a practitioner too, but curious what works for you.
Yeah, so the first thing, Julie, would be to address the underlying cause. So, kind of diving deep into the trauma and doing some cognitive behavioral therapy, acceptance community therapy, motivational interviewing, goals, values, reframing those held beliefs that tend to hold us back from growth, all of those cognitive aspects of it. And then there's a lot of different things. There's different things for sleep latency, there's different supplements and herbal medicines that I think about for waking in the middle of the night. But the primary thing would be balancing the nervous system. If the nervous system is balanced, after 20 minutes of functional breathing, a lot of my patients don't even make it to 20 minutes because they're asleep by minute 10. So the practices themselves can be very restful. But as far as supplementation for sleep latency, 5-HTP, melatonin, L-theanine, some of the different inhibitory neurotransmitters when it comes to either herbal medicines, hops, valerian. For waking in the middle of the night, nutmeg is actually probably one of the best herbals because it's one of those that doesn't really kind of kick in until about 4 hours after you take it. So a real great one for waking in the middle of the night.
Cool.
Awesome, thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Tried the nutmeg.
Yeah, I never heard that one before. That's great for me too.
Yeah.
So Michelle says,
Yep, absolutely.
Michelle says, "Thank you, super interesting information." And Robert says, "Will any of your natural techniques help atrial fibrillation? I have tried homeopathic treatments now for a while. The experience made me cut out strenuous exercise after a minute or so." So, yeah, asking about atrial fibrillation.
Yeah, AFib. AFib is certainly one of those things that we want to keep an eye on because it can result in clots and strokes and things like that if the severity is significant enough. But yes, absolutely. There are natural rhythm stabilizers and even doing some of the techniques that we just talked about. Again, we're balancing the nervous system, we're balancing every system. So we're balancing the cardiovascular system. So we're going to be sending different neurological signals down to the heart.
awesome. If you want more clarification, I'd fully invite you to join in and ask as well if you want more information on that. Anna says, thank you for sharing. A very interesting topic. Floor says, what kind of supplements do you use for these states of stress and insomnia? Which I think you did talk about some of them here. What's a good one for insomnia? Because I know that's very prevalent in society today. It could have to do with, all the lights, artificial lights going on. Now, I have a couple things that's helped me. I'm curious what helped your clients.
Sure. So as far as supplementation specifically, I go back to the inhibitory neurotransmitters. I really love a kind of physician level supplement that no one here would be able to find online, unfortunately. But it's called Relax Max, a company called Zymogen. It's got several different inhibitory neurotransmitters and L-theanine, so super helpful. Some of the different herbal medicines that I do like, kava is one of them, a fairly high dose. And like I said, the hops, valerian, but kava is another one that I like to use. There are different technologies and devices for sleep onset as well. That some of my patients have used. Modius is one of them. That stimulates different cranial nerves to help induce sleep, induce relaxation. There's another one called Ebb, and that one is more about kind of cooling the head. So for those folks that tend to have those racing minds at night, that's another one that patients of mine have used with success.
My parents actually gave me this drink one time. They were kind of experimenting with herbs, and they gave me this drink that I never had before. It was called lemon balm. And I was like, oh, this thing tastes good. So I drank a couple. Didn't know that it makes you go to sleep really quickly. Like after 3 cups, I was out.
3 cups is a lot.
It is a lot, but it knocked me out. And this was like during broad daylight. This was like noon. And I was like, what was in that tea? Found out a little too late. Yeah, lemon balms. Oh my god. I think it's probably one of the best ones.
Catnip is very similar to lemon balm.
Unless you're a cat.
I think it actually is just slightly more potent and tastes a little bit better too.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to do that. I'll have to do some experiments with that. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing. There's some other ones too. I know chamomile for sure. Lavender is really good. So like we use those like as essential oils or teas. Those are really cool too. So my parents here are asking, what is the amount for the nutmeg? I'm assuming the quantity dose-wise.
Yeah, it can be hard to source. There's a company in the Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle. The name is escaping me at the moment, but I could get back to you on that.
Dose is important. Very important. There's another question too that says, the more restful sleep could GABA be helpful?
Yes, absolutely. GABA is one of those inhibitory neurotransmitters that we secrete naturally at night, so it certainly can help.
Yeah, and I think also, dosage should be important in that too. And also, you don't want to do too much supplementation because certain things like the body naturally makes. So if you start supplementing the body with it, it's going to get lazy and not want to make it anymore. So you're going to be less adaptable if you kind of abuse those sorts of things too. So it's important to have a balanced approach there. That's what practitioners helps with that.
Yeah, you only want to use necessary supplementation for a very specific purpose, and almost always it's for a specific therapeutic time window, not doing it for forever.
So yeah, you guys have not been able to ask a question, go ahead and type something into the chat below. Whether it's your favorite emoji or a question, or if you just want to hop on, say hi, and share your experience with us so far, go ahead and do that. I see Rob hopped on here. Rob, how's it going?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, I have both my cell phone and my laptop open here, so I'm not sure what to really use.
Either one. Whichever one you please.
Is there any more that you wanted to say about patient-human relations terms of straightening out the nerves to the heart?
Yeah, so with several patients, I've noticed that they go into those AFib episodes when they're more stressed, right? And so balancing the nervous system, balancing that stress response can be a significant help. And the first place that I'm starting with those people is what we talked about earlier with the functional breathing. Functional breathing is very effortless, very gentle breathing. In through the nose. We don't want to take in more than what we need at rest. The only reason that we would need to take in more oxygen is if our metabolic demand increased. So if we're, jogging, running, something like that. But when we're at rest and we're just sitting down or laying down, the more effortless, the better when it comes to breathing. So in through the nose, taking that breath, that gentle, soft, effortless breath into the belly, usually for 5 seconds, and then exhaling out for that same time, 5 seconds. Trying to create a very smooth, rhythmic, kind of sine wave, sinusoidal type of rhythm in your breathing.
Yeah, and it's important to harmonize all the different rhythms of the body, because that way you become coherent. And so in your coherent states, that's when you become more adaptable. You're able to do things that basically bring you more clarity. You're able to have more clarity, more focused thought, and you're more responsive. And then, there's a lot more that goes into that, but people have even reported having spiritual states, like spiritual awakening, when they're able to have their brain and their heart and all their other breathing rhythms and all the other different rhythms of their body, align.
Yeah, a lot of cool things can happen when you get all those different bodily systems into coherence. Different mystical experiences.
Absolutely. Actually, have you had any yourself? Because I've had several. I would love to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when you go into those depth states, you go into that absorption, you lose track of everything. And that's where that mystic happens. That's where that magic happens, is in that stillness, in that quietness. So, yes, I've had several myself.
Yeah, I highly recommend anyone that's never had that kind of experience definitely come to biohacking and healing retreats, because that's where you'll have the opportunity to experience stuff like that. And it's life-changing because you gain so much wisdom. It's such an amazing experience. There's not enough words to explain how amazing it is. So the best thing to do, I have to say, is to just try it for yourself, experience it. Can't get there, then come to the biohacking and healing retreats, and you will. You will. So we've got another question here from Julie. I have used magnesium threonate with so many benefits. Crosses the blood-brain barrier. Have you used it?
Cool, yeah. Magnesium L-threonate, a very specific magnesium for the brain. And I have used it with patients before. One of the things that I do use it for is to help with kind of focus, concentration, productivity. It's a very gentle type of supportive stimulant to the brain. So it certainly can be a nice thing to have on board.
For sure.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, you said it, you found it so useful. Tell us about your experience, Julie.
Yeah, I was finding a lot of people, I live in Scottsdale, so we have a lot of cell towers here, and people are reporting to me that they feel sick from that, and it's kind of, you hear the same thing over and over. So I was doing a protocol using that threonate, quercetin, and believe it or not, Xylitol. I know that's over the counter, and then turning off all the Wi-Fi and turning on red light. Within 45 minutes, people would rebound, feel better. They would say, "Oh, I feel like my brain's opening up and calming down at the same time, and clear." Even the pain all over the body is getting better.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, central nervous system, so it's going to have those broad effects.
Yeah, I've never tried magnesium threonate myself. I'm learning that myself. Yeah. You can go to any place to get that, or where do you go for that exactly?
You guys have Sprouts, Ezekiel?
Yeah.
It's called Magmine, and that's just a single magnesium threonate. There's another one that has 3 of them. Got the glycinate and threonate. I prefer just the magnesium threonate.
I think I call it X-Team.
Yes, you're correct. Yeah, that's the trademark name. Let's see. Yeah,
Okay.
it started out like Zymogen products, I think. That's where I kind of discovered it first. Yeah. I think it's really good for so many things, and especially with EMF sickness, which can cause insomnia. I think.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I'm finding that a lot.
Interesting. Have you used that yourself, Michael?
Yes, I've used magnesium L3 before. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I use it specifically in cases with folks that want a little bit more focused productivity.
Do you have like a preferred like brand, or do you use the same one that Julie uses?
I'll usually use the Zymogen product.
Zymogen.
Zymogen, awesome.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Robert says I used it for 2 years now, and he got it from Mercola. Interesting.
Yeah, Mercola has a good one.
Okay.
Shots. This is not medical grade. Per se. But they both are Mag Team.
X-Team.
Yeah. So same thing with trademark. I'm a big Zymogen. Their quality's good, but they're also expensive.
Awesome. If you guys have any final questions for Dr. Michael, go ahead and type them down below. If not, we're going to go ahead and open up into our little social hour here where you guys can just chat amongst yourselves, and we'll end the recording after that point, once we reach that point. So if you have any last minute questions for Dr. Michael, go ahead and ask him. Or you can also type emojis in our little chat. I will get to you. So we'll close in about 5 minutes or so with the formal presentation, and then we'll open up into a little social hour here. And Dr. Michael, is there any other questions that perhaps you have for us or for me, or any last things you just remember that you maybe want to tell somebody here about one of their questions?
No, not that I can think of, but I am curious to hear more about what you guys have planned for your next retreats and more about your community.
Yeah, so our community is a bunch of biohackers and healers that all get together, and we share in our wisdom and our knowledge of biohacking, making the nervous system more adaptable, increasing its capability, right? So we're looking to help people become smarter and more creative through these alternative, what they call them, alternative means, right? Which we all know is actually not really the alternative. It's the stuff that actually works. So we're actually use biometrics to gauge that, to measure that out. And so we go to different locations. Our next retreat is going to be in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, and it's going to be November 11th through 14th. And so we're going to be going to this beautiful place by the beach. We're going to be doing some biohacking stuff amongst us with other healers for 2 to 3 days. And then the last day, we're actually all going to go out. This is optional. You can stay at the beach and just have a beach day, or you can go on the included excursion, which is to go and visit a shaman temple and participate in a real shamanic ceremony. And then there they have a bunch of plant medicines. Some of the ones they told me that they were going to have is ayahuasca, rapé, sapito, which is like really powerful stuff. And they all help with your neurology. I think they also might have psilocybin, which is what most people consider like magic mushrooms, which has also been proven to help bring your neurons closer together, basically increase the connections between your neurons, between neurons that don't normally communicate, and then that's the process that actually helps you become smarter and more creative as well. So we'll do stuff like that, and it's really fun. It's very inexpensive actually compared to most events and most retreats. You get the most bang for your buck here. So I highly recommend you guys ask us about that, or you can even just sign up right through our hub as well. You just have to click on our biohacking experiences. You'll see the banner there. Robert says, I have a lot of now, I'm not sure what you mean by now, or Protocol for Life. What do you think of their products? I guess that's a brand.
Yeah, there's the Now brand and Protocol for Life Balance brand. Clinically, I tend to stay away from the stuff you can find on the shelf, but I will use the Protocol for Life Balance products for those patients of mine that are on a budget.
Awesome, that's good to know. Learning more stuff every day. Lois says, thank you all for an amazing conversation. I have to leave. Until next time, we will. Thank you so much, Lois, for coming. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and open up into our little social hours. If you guys just want to go ahead and unmute yourselves and just make as much noise as you want, go ahead. And you're no under obligation to stay, Michael, if you don't want to, but you're more than welcome to be a continuation of the discussion. But yeah, you guys, we can all socialize and talk about the weather or whatever it is that people like to talk about, right? I know what I like to talk about. It's this stuff.
Cool, man. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And super interesting. I love the community, and the retreat sounds awesome.
And I would love to have you come. I mean, that would be amazing. You know so much about this stuff. Like, you'd be your people, you know? It's like, it'd be heaven. It'd be heaven for you.
Yeah.
You'll get to meet a lot of connections too, you know, potentially get clients. We allow people to do that. If you're a practitioner and you meet people that you really jive with and you want to share in that, by all means, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you.
Cool, man. Cool. You said it's in November?
Yep, November 11th through 14th. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, if you get a chance, send me a link to my email.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you a message later and double check to make sure it's the right one.
All right,
you so much.
Thanks again so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.